I never thought I would watch my own father throw his wheelchair-bound parent into a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. But there I was, standing in the marble foyer of the Carter mansion, my hands still trembling from the sound of shattering glass, and the sight of blood dripping from my grandfather's wrinkled hand onto the pristine white snow outside. The wine glass had exploded in slow motion. One moment, Grandpa George's shaking hands were trying to steady the crystal stem. The next, my father's palm connected with such force that the burgundy liquid seemed to hang in the air before splashing across Mrs. Wellington's designer gown. She was the wife of the investor my father desperately needed to save his sinking company. I saw the fury ignite in my father's eyes before anyone else did. "You worthless old man!" he had roared, his voice cutting through the Christmas carols playing softly in the background. "You are destroying my future." I remember lunging forward, my heels catching on the Persian rug as I tried to reach Grandpa. My father's security guards were faster. Their hands clamped down on my arms with bruising force as I screamed for them to stop. But Thomas Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises, and my father in name only, was already giving orders with the cold efficiency of a man who had long ago traded his humanity for ambition. "Get them out of my sight," he snarled, "both of them." What happened next still plays in my mind like a horror film I cannot stop watching. My father ripped the thick winter coat from my shoulders, leaving me in nothing but the thin black dress I had worn to serve drinks to his guests. My phone, my only connection to the outside world, met its end under his Italian leather shoe. The screen splintered into a spider web of cracks before he ground it into dust. "Let us see how you survive without me," he said, his breath hot with expensive whiskey. "Do not even think about calling anyone for help." Then came the most devastating moment. My father grabbed the handles of Grandpa's wheelchair and shoved, hard. The chair tilted, teetered, and then tumbled down the stone steps leading to the driveway. I threw myself down those stairs, my bare knees scraping against ice and concrete, using my body to break my grandfather's fall. Behind us, the door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the freezing December air. Through the frosted windows, I could see the party resuming champagne glasses raised in toast, while outside we were left to freeze. If you are hearing this story and thinking about someone in your life who has made you feel small, worthless, or disposable, please take a moment right now to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment about your own experience. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And together, we can break the silence around family abuse and manipulation. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began, because that Christmas Eve was not the first time my father showed me who he really was. It was simply the night I finally stopped making excuses for him. I was 24 years old when everything fell apart, but the cracks had been forming for years. After my mother died when I was 16, my father remarried within 6 months. Lydia was everything my mother was not. Where my mother had been warm and nurturing, Lydia was cold and calculating. She saw Grandpa George and me as obstacles to her luxurious lifestyle, and she made sure my father saw us the same way. I had been working 3 jobs to support Grandpa and myself in a cramped studio apartment on the wrong side of Portland. My graphic design degree collected dust, while I waited tables at a downtown restaurant, cleaned offices at night, and did freelance work whenever exhaustion did not claim me first. Grandpa had moved in with me after my father declared him too much of a burden. The old man who had built Carter Enterprises from nothing was now considered worthless because he shook when he held a coffee cup and sometimes forgot what day it was. Or so I thought. The apartment we shared was barely 1,500 square feet, with radiators that clanked, but produced little heat, and windows that rattled with every gust of wind. Grandpa slept in the only bedroom, while I made do with a pull-out couch that had seen better decades. I did not mind. He was all I had left of my real family. Every morning, I would help him dress, make him breakfast, and ensure he took his medications before rushing to my first shift. Every night I would come home to find him sitting in the same chair, staring out the window at the city lights, looking so small and fragile that my heart would break all over again. My father would call occasionally, always with the same request. I need you at the house for a function. Make yourself presentable, do not embarrass me, and do not bring the old man unless I specifically say so. I went every time. Some part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, he would remember he had a daughter, that he would see how hard I was working and feel some flicker of pride or love. Instead, I was invisible labour. I would spend hours preparing food, serving guests and cleaning up afterward, all while Lydia made snide comments about my worn shoes and outdated dresses. My father never defended me. He barely acknowledged my existence unless I made a mistake. The Christmas party was supposed to be different. My father had specifically invited Grandpa, which should have been my first warning sign. Thomas Carter never did anything without calculation. He needed the optics of a family man for the investors from New York who were considering a major merger with Carter Enterprises. What I did not know then was that my father was drowning in debt. The lavish lifestyle, the mansion, the cars, the designer clothes for Lydia, it was all built on leveraged assets and desperate loans. He needed this merger like a drowning man needs air. I arrived early to help set up as always. The mansion looked like something from a luxury magazine spread. White roses and evergreen garlands adorned every surface. A towering Christmas tree dominated the grand foyer, dripping with ornaments that cost more than my monthly rent. Caterers bustled through the kitchen while a string quartet warmed up in the corner. My father inspected everything with the intensity of a general preparing for battle. When I wheeled Grandpa in through the service entrance, Lydia wrinkled her nose as if we had brought in something foul. "Try not to let him drool on anyone important," she said, adjusting a diamond bracelet that could have paid off my student loans. The party itself was a performance. My father played the role of generous host and devoted family man with practiced ease. He introduced investors to his father with just the right amount of reverence, painting a picture of generational success and family values. I watched from the sidelines serving champagne and canapes, wondering how everyone in that room could be so easily fooled. Then came the moment that changed everything. Grandpa had been sitting quietly in his wheelchair near the fireplace. Mrs. Wellington, the investor's wife, was holding court nearby, her dress probably worth more than my car. I saw Grandpa reach for a glass of wine on the side table. His hands were shaking more than usual. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he was cold. Maybe the universe just decided that night would be the catalyst for everything that followed. The glass tilted. Wine splashed across pristine silk. Mrs. Wellington shrieked, and my father snapped. The violence was shocking, not just because it was public, but because it was so controlled. My father did not yell at first. He walked over, calmly, apologised to Mrs. Wellington with smooth charm, and then turned to his father. The slap that sent the glass flying from Grandpa's hand was delivered with surgical precision. Hard enough to shatter crystal and draw blood, but calculated to look almost like an accident to anyone not paying close attention. The words that followed were not accidental at all. After the guards threw us out, I half-carried, half-dragged Grandpa the 6 blocks to where I had parked my ancient Honda. The snow was coming down harder now, each flake feeling like a tiny knife against my exposed skin. Grandpa was crying silently, blood from the cut on his hand seeping through the handkerchief I had pressed against it. I was shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. We made it back to the apartment somehow. I do not remember the drive. I remember the heater in my car was broken. I remember Grandpa's lips were turning blue. I remember thinking that if we died that night, my father would probably be relieved. The apartment was no warmer than the car. The radiator had chosen that night to finally give up completely. I piled every blanket I owned onto Grandpa and tried to start a fire in the ancient fireplace that I had never actually used before. Smoke filled the room. The fire would not catch. Grandpa was shivering so violently that the whole bed shook. By 3 a.m, he was burning with fever. I called every urgent care clinic within 10 miles. All were closed for the holiday. The emergency room would cost thousands of dollars we did not have. I made the decision that I thought was practical at the time. I would wait until morning and take him to the free clinic downtown. I would sell the only thing of value I had, left a silver necklace my mother had given me to buy whatever medicine he needed. Except when I went to the drawer where I kept it, the necklace was gone. I tore that apartment apart. I checked every drawer, every pocket, every possible hiding place. Nothing. Then I remembered. 3 months ago, when my father had asked me to house sit while he and Lydia vacationed in Monaco. He had full access to my apartment. The necklace had been there when they arrived. It was gone when they left. I had convinced myself I had misplaced it. Now the truth crashed over me like ice water. He had stolen from me, his own daughter. The last piece of my mother that I had, and he had taken it, probably sold it to pay for another bottle of vintage wine or another piece of jewellery for Lydia. I sat on the floor of that freezing apartment, listening to my grandfather struggle to breathe, and felt something inside me break. Not my spirit. Something else. The part of me that kept making excuses. The part that kept hoping. The part that kept believing that family meant something to Thomas Carter. I hate him, I whispered to the empty room. I hate him, and I'm going to make him pay for this. Morning came with weak winter sunlight filtering through dirty windows. I had not slept. I had spent the night alternating between sponging Grandpa's forehead with cool water and pacing the apartment like a caged animal. I had made lists in my head of every wrong my father had ever done, every cruelty, every dismissal, every moment he had chosen money and status over his own family. The list was long. When dawn finally broke, I expected to find Grandpa worse. Instead, when I checked on him, his eyes were open. But they were different. The cloudy, confused look that had become so familiar was gone. In its place was a clarity that made me take a step back. He looked at me without the usual uncertainty, without the trembling fear that had characterized the past 5 years. "Harper," he said, his voice stronger than I had heard it in years. "Call a taxi. We are not going to the clinic. What, Grandpa, you need medicine. I need you to trust me. Call a taxi and tell them to take us to Sovereign Tower." I thought the fever had made him delirious. Sovereign Tower was the tallest building in Portland, home to the city's most exclusive corporate offices and penthouses. It was where billionaires worked and million-dollar deals were made. It was not a place for people like us. But something in his eyes stopped my protests. I called the taxi. The ride downtown felt surreal. Grandpa sat up straight, no longer hunched over in weakness. He stared out the window with an intensity I had never seen, as if he was seeing the city for the first time, or perhaps seeing it again after a long absence. When we pulled up to Sovereign Tower, he got out of the taxi without my help. He stood on his own, steady and sure, while I fumbled with my wallet to pay the driver. The lobby of Sovereign Tower was all marble and glass, soaring ceilings, and modern art that probably cost more than I would make in a lifetime. I felt acutely aware of my wrinkled dress from the night before, the mascara smudged under my eyes, the fact that I probably smelled like smoke and desperation. The security guard at the desk looked at us with barely concealed disdain. Then Grandpa spoke. "George Carter to see the executive floor." The change in the guard's demeanour was instantaneous. He practically leapt to attention, his face going pale. "Mr. Chairman," he stammered. "Of course, sir. Right away, sir. Should I alert your office?" "No need," Grandpa said calmly. "We will announce ourselves." The elevator ride to the top floor took less than a minute, but it felt like hours. I stared at my grandfather, this man I thought I knew, and realised I knew nothing at all. "Grandpa," I started, but he held up a hand. "Wait," he said simply. The elevator doors opened directly into a penthouse office that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Portland. The furnishings were minimal but clearly expensive, all clean lines, and understated luxury. And everywhere on the walls, on the desk, in silver frames on the credenza, were photographs. Grandpa as a young man breaking ground on what would become Carter Enterprises. Grandpa shaking hands with mayors and governors. Grandpa receiving awards and accolades. And there in the centre of the largest wall was a portrait I recognised. My grandmother, who had died before I was born, and next to her my mother as a little girl. I felt my knees go weak. A woman in an impeccable suit appeared from an adjoining office. "Mr. Carter," she said warmly, then noticed me and smiled. "And you must be Harper. Your grandfather has told me so much about you. Welcome to Shadow Corporation." Shadow Corporation. The name meant nothing to me then. It would mean everything very soon. Grandpa gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. He lowered himself into the chair behind it with none of the shakiness that had defined him for 5 years. When he looked at me, I saw the man he must have been before, sharp, calculating, powerful. "I imagine you have questions," he said. I could barely form words. How is any of this real? "Very real. Let me start at the beginning. 5 years ago, after your father pushed me out of Carter Enterprises and declared me incompetent, I could have fought him legally. I could have destroyed him then. But I wanted to see something first. I wanted to see if the son I raised had any decency left in him. If given the chance to prove himself without my interference, he would show compassion, integrity, or at minimum basic human kindness. So I disappeared. I let him think he had won. I let everyone think I was a confused old man losing his grip on reality. "But you are not," I whispered. "No, I am the founder and sole owner of Shadow Corporation. We are a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring distressed assets. Over the past 5 years, we have quietly purchased 80% of your father's debt. Every loan he thought came from different banks, every line of credit he desperately needed to maintain his lifestyle. It all flows back to me. Thomas does not know it, but I own him." Why put yourself through that? Why put me through that?" His face softened for the first time. "Because I needed to be sure. And because I needed you to be sure. Harper, you have spent your entire adult life trying to earn your father's love. You have sacrificed your dreams, your comfort, your future, all hoping that someday he would see your worth. Last night he threw you into a blizzard. He would have let you freeze to death. I needed you to see him for what he truly is before I could offer you what I am about to offer you. Which is revenge," he said simply, "and justice, and a future where you never have to beg for scraps from anyone ever again." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were financial documents, legal papers, photographs and recordings. 5 years of evidence of my father's corruption, tax evasion, fraud and embezzlement. "I have been documenting everything," Grandpa continued. "Every illegal deal, every bribe, every law he has broken in his desperate attempt to appear successful. I have enough here to send him to prison for 20 years. But I am not going to do it. You are. May. You. Starting tomorrow, you are going to become someone your father does not recognize. We are going to give you a new wardrobe, a new identity as a representative of a mysterious investment firm. And you are going to walk into Carter Enterprises and offer him a lifeline. You are going to watch him grovel. You are going to watch him debase himself for money. And then when the time is right, you are going to take everything from him the way he tried to take everything from us." I should have felt shocked. I should have felt conflicted. Instead, I felt a cold, clear certainty settle over me, like armour. "When do we start?" I asked. The transformation began immediately. Grandpa's assistant, whose name was Margaret, took me to a private stylist who outfitted me with a wardrobe that cost more than I had made in the past year. Gone were my thrift store finds and worn jeans. In their place were tailored suits, designer heels and accessories that whispered wealth rather than screamed it. My hair, which I had been cutting myself to save money, was professionally coloured and styled. I learned to walk differently, talk differently, carry myself with the confidence of someone who had never known what it was like to worry about rent. Within a week I was unrecognisable. The name we chose was Hartley Sinclair, investment analyst for Apex Acquisitions, a subsidiary of Shadow Corporation that existed solely on paper. My cover story was simple. I represented a group of private investors interested in acquiring and restructuring Carter Enterprises. I had the capital, the credentials and the cold demeanour of someone who saw businesses as numbers on a spreadsheet rather than people's livelihoods. My first meeting with my father was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. I spent the night before practicing my lines, my posture, my facial expressions. I could not afford to give anything away. One flicker of recognition, one moment of hesitation, and the entire plan would collapse. Margaret drove me to Carter Enterprises in a black Rolls-Royce with tinted windows. The building that housed my father's company was impressive from the outside, all glass and steel in the heart of downtown Portland. Inside it was clear that the money had been spent on appearances. The lobby was gorgeous, but I noticed the receptionist using outdated computer equipment. The art on the walls was expensive, but the carpet was worn in high-traffic areas. It was all smoke and mirrors, just like my father. "Mr. Carter will see you now," the assistant said, leading me to the executive suite on the top floor. My father's office was exactly what I expected. Oversized desk, leather furniture, walls covered with framed awards and photographs of him shaking hands with people more important than he would ever be. Thomas Carter himself stood when I entered, his smile wide and practiced. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. His watch cost more than that. His wedding ring a gaudy thing that Lydia had insisted on glittered as he extended his hand. "Miss Sinclair, such a pleasure to meet you. Please have a seat." I shook his hand briefly, my grip firm and businesslike, and sat without waiting for him to indicate where. Small power play. Assert dominance immediately. I had learned a lot in a very short time. "Mr. Carter," I began, my voice crisp and professional, "I will not waste your time with pleasantries. Apex Acquisitions has reviewed your company's financials and we see potential. However, we also see significant liabilities." I watched the smile falter slightly. "Every business has challenges in this economy," he said defensively. I slid a folder across his desk. "Your challenges go beyond economic headwinds. You are leveraged at 300% of your company's actual value. Your debt service is consuming 70% of your revenue. You have 3 major loans coming due in the next 6 months, and based on our analysis, you do not have the cash flow to service them. You need us, Mr. Carter. The question is whether we need you." The colour drained from his face as he flipped through the documents. These were private financial statements. "How did you—" "We do our homework." I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease, while he squirmed. "Here is what we are prepared to offer. Apex will purchase your outstanding debt at 60 cents on the dollar. We will then restructure your company, which will require significant changes to management and operations. You will retain a position, but you will no longer have final say on strategic decisions. In exchange, you avoid bankruptcy and prison time for the various irregularities we discovered in your books." "Prison time? Tax evasion is a federal crime, Mr. Carter. So is securities fraud. I am offering you a way out. I suggest you take it." I stood, signalling the meeting was over. "You have 48 hours to consider our offer. After that, we move on to other opportunities and you can deal with your creditors on your own." "Wait," he said, standing quickly. "Please, can we discuss the terms? I'm sure we can find an arrangement that works for everyone." And there it was, the great Thomas Carter begging. I kept my expression neutral. "I will have my assistant schedule a follow-up meeting. Good day, Mr. Carter." I walked out of that office with my head high and my heart pounding. I had done it. I had sat across from the man who had tormented me my entire life and made him afraid. It felt better than I had imagined. But the victory was short-lived. 2 days later, just as we were preparing for the next phase of the plan, Margaret rushed into Grandpa's office where I was reviewing documents. "We have a problem," she said, her normally composed face showing genuine concern. "Thomas figured out the connection to George. He is fighting back." "How?" "He filed an emergency petition for conservatorship. He is claiming that George is mentally incompetent and that you are taking advantage of him to steal his assets. He has a court order for a psychiatric evaluation, and the police are on their way to enforce it." I felt ice flood my veins. "He is trying to have Grandpa declared insane, and you declared his abuser. If they execute this order, George will be taken to a psychiatric facility for evaluation, which in Oregon can take up to 72 hours. During that time, as his son and next of kin Thomas would have temporary control of George's affairs, including Shadow Corporation." Grandpa, who had been listening quietly, stood up. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe. The petition was filed under emergency provisions. Thomas has a judge in his pocket who pushed it through." "Then we do not have time to fight this legally." Grandpa looked at me. "Harper, do you remember Michael Chen, your friend from college?" "Michael, yes, but what does he have to do with—" "He is an FBI agent now, correct, specializing in white-collar crime." "Oh my God." I grabbed my phone and dialed Michael's number before Grandpa finished speaking. Michael picked up on the second ring. "Harper, is everything okay?" "Michael, I need your help, and I need it now. My father is trying to have my grandfather committed to steal his company. There are police on their way right now with a court order based on fraudulent medical claims. Can you stop them?" There was a pause. "Harper, I am FBI. I do not have jurisdiction over local police executing a state court order unless there is evidence of federal crimes involved in obtaining that order. I have documents showing my father bribed a state judge, committed tax fraud, and is using falsified medical records. Can you stop the police if I can prove this is part of a larger federal investigation? Another pause, longer this time. Where are you right now? Sovereign Tower Executive Suite. Do not move. Do not let anyone take your grandfather anywhere. I will be there in 10 minutes. Michael arrived in 8 minutes with 2 other federal agents. The timing was perfect. The Portland police had just entered the building when Michael intercepted them in the lobby. I watched from the security cameras as he presented his credentials and explained that George Carter was a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation and could not be removed from his current location without compromising that investigation. The local police were not happy, but they also were not stupid enough to interfere with a federal case. They left. My father, however, was not done. That night, Lydia showed up at the building. Security would not let her pass the lobby, but she made enough of a scene that I went down to deal with her personally. "You poisonous little bitch," she hissed when she saw me, all pretense of sophistication gone. "You think you are so clever turning the old man against Thomas. But you are nothing. You have always been nothing. A pathetic little charity case who should be grateful we did not leave you in the gutter with your mother." I walked right up to her, close enough that the security cameras would not pick up what I said next. "My mother was worth 10 of you," I said quietly. "And when this is over, you are going to prison right alongside my father. I have evidence of every illegal transaction you have made, every piece of jewellery you bought with embezzled funds, every tax return you falsified. You are going down, Lydia. The only question is how far." Her face went pale. "You cannot prove." "I can prove everything. And I will. Now get out of this building before I have you arrested for trespassing." She left, but not before promising that Thomas would destroy me. I did not doubt he would try. The final confrontation came 2 weeks later. My father had scheduled a major press event to announce the merger with the Wellington Group, the investors from the Christmas party. He had somehow convinced them to move forward despite his financial problems, probably through some combination of lies and creative accounting. The event was being held at the Portland Luxury Hotel with media coverage and live streaming. It was meant to be his triumphant comeback, the moment where he proved to everyone that Thomas Carter was still a force to be reckoned with. It would be his downfall instead. Grandpa and I arrived separately. I came as Hartley Sinclair, representing Apex Acquisitions, supposedly there to finalise our own deal with Carter Enterprises. Grandpa came in, his wheelchair, pushed by Margaret, playing the role of the confused old man one last time. The ballroom was packed. Investors, journalists, business leaders all gathered to witness what they thought would be a celebration. My father stood on the stage in a custom tuxedo, Lydia beside him in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. He was in his element, working, the room shaking hands, making promises he could not keep. The presentation began at 7 sharp. My father took the microphone and launched into a speech about legacy family values and the bright future of Carter Enterprises. He talked about his father's vision and how he was honouring it. He talked about building something meaningful for the next generation. He talked about integrity and trust. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I waited. The lights dimmed for his slideshow presentation, meant to showcase Carter Enterprises' achievements and projected growth. But the first slide that appeared on the screen was not a corporate logo or a financial chart. It was security camera footage from Christmas Eve. Crystal clear video of my father slapping the wine glass from Grandpa's hand, of him shouting, of him ordering us thrown out, of him personally ripping my coat off and destroying my phone, of him pushing the wheelchair down the stairs. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. My father stood frozen at the podium, his face going from tan to grey in seconds. Who turned that off?" he shouted. But the video kept playing, and after it finished, more footage appeared. Security camera recordings from Carter Enterprises showing my father taking cash from the company safe. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts. Recorded phone calls where he discussed bribing inspectors and falsifying safety reports. Audio of him laughing with Lydia about the stupid investors who believed his lies. 5 minutes of irrefutable evidence of corruption, fraud and cruelty played on a screen 12 feet tall in front of 200 witnesses and a dozen cameras. The lights came back on. My father was frantically searching for his security team, but they were nowhere to be found. Grandpa had replaced them all that morning with our own people. The main doors to the ballroom opened. Grandpa entered, walking steadily without the wheelchair, leaning on a cane, but clearly in command of his faculties. I followed behind him, no longer Hartley Sinclair, but Harper Carter, dressed in a suit that proclaimed I belonged in boardrooms and power lunches. Michael Chen and 4 other FBI agents flanked us. The room fell silent. Grandpa walked slowly to the stage. My father backed away from the microphone as if it were radioactive. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grandpa said, his voice clear and strong. "I apologize for the interruption, but I felt it was important that you all know the truth about the man you are about to trust with your investments. I am George Carter, founder of Carter Enterprises and current chairman of Shadow Corporation. The man on this stage is my son, Thomas Carter, and I am here to announce that effective immediately he is terminated as CEO of Carter Enterprises for cause including but not limited to embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion and assault." The room erupted in chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Investors were fleeing for the exits. Lydia tried to run but found her path blocked by FBI agents. My father finally found his voice. "This is absurd. You have no authority. I am the CEO. I own this company." I stepped forward and dropped a thick file folder on the podium. "You own 17%, I said clearly. Shadow Corporation owns the remaining 83% through acquired debt. The board met this morning and voted unanimously to remove you. It is over, Dad." His eyes finally focused on me, really seeing me for the first time. "Harper." His voice was small, confused. Michael stepped forward with handcuffs. "Thomas Carter, you are under arrest for federal tax evasion, wire fraud and securities fraud. You have the right to remain silent." My father looked at me as Michael restrained him. "How could you do this to me? I am your father." I picked up the file folder, held it for a moment, then dropped it at his feet. "You stopped being my father the night you threw me into a snowstorm. Consider this return to sender." As the FBI led him away, I felt something I had not expected. Not triumph, not joy, just a deep, profound relief, like a weight I had been carrying for 24 years had finally been lifted. The aftermath was both swift and slow. Swift in terms of legal proceedings. The evidence we had gathered was so overwhelming that my father's lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. He received 15 years in federal prison. Lydia got 8 years for her role in the money laundering scheme. Slow in terms of emotional recovery. Turns out that even when you win against your abuser, the scars do not disappear overnight. I visited my father once in prison about 3 months after his sentencing. He looked smaller, somehow diminished in the orange jumpsuit with no expensive suits to hide behind. He cried when he saw me, begged me to forgive him, said he never meant to hurt me, said he loved me and always had. I let him finish. Then I placed a package on the table between us. It was the coat he had ripped off me that Christmas Eve. I had kept it, never washed it, so it still had the stains from the snow and dirt and blood. "I brought you something," I said calmly. "You told me to see how I survived without you. Well, I survived just fine. Better than fine, actually. This coat kept me warm that night, and every night after, because it reminded me that I was strong enough to survive anything, even you. I thought you might need it now. I hear prison gets cold." I stood to leave. "Harper, please. I am your father. Surely we can—" "No," I interrupted. "You were the man who contributed DNA to my existence. A father is someone who protects his child, who sacrifices for them, who builds them up instead of tearing them down. You were never that person, and you never will be." I walked out of that prison and never looked back. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Grandpa officially retired and named me CEO of a charitable foundation he established to help people escaping abusive family situations. The foundation was funded by the assets seized from my father's fraud schemes. It seemed appropriate that his greed would now help the very people he had victimized. Carter Enterprises was restructured and eventually sold to a conglomerate that actually knew how to run it ethically. The employees kept their jobs, the investors recovered most of their money. The Carter name, while tarnished, was not completely destroyed. I moved into a small but beautiful apartment overlooking the river. Not a penthouse, not a mansion, just a comfortable space that was mine, paid for with money I earned legitimately. I adopted a rescue dog named Justice, which Grandpa found hilarious. I started painting again, something I'd given up years ago because I was too exhausted from working 3 jobs. I made new friends who knew nothing about my past and liked me for who I was, not who my family used to be. Michael and I started dating seriously. He understood what I had been through in a way most people could not. His job meant he saw the worst of humanity regularly, but he also saw the survivors, the people who rebuilt their lives from ashes. He saw me that way as a survivor, not a victim. Grandpa and I have dinner together every Sunday. He is teaching me everything he knows about business and investment, preparing me to eventually take over Shadow Corporation. But more importantly, he is teaching me what family is supposed to look like. Support without conditions, love without manipulation, pride in who I am, not what I can do for him. Last week was Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year since the night that changed everything. Grandpa and I, along with Michael and a few close friends, had a quiet dinner at my apartment. No expensive caterers, no designer dresses, no champagne that costs more than a car payment. Just good food, good company, and the warmth of people who genuinely care about each other. As we sat around my small dining table, Grandpa raised his glass of wine. To Harper, he said, "Who taught this old man that sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you can learn to fly?" I raised my own glass, fighting back tears, to second chances, and to knowing when to walk away from people who will never change. We drank, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt something I had never experienced before. Peace. Not happiness, though, that came and went. Not security, though I had more of that now than ever before. But genuine bone-deep peace with who I was and where I was going. I learnt so much from that terrible Christmas Eve and everything that followed. I learned that blood does not equal family. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. That your worth is not determined by whether someone else can see it. That healing is not linear, and forgiveness is not required for closure. That you can be kind without being a doormat. That strength sometimes looks like tears, and sometimes looks like walking away. Most importantly, I learnt that nobody, not your father, not your family, not anyone, has the right to make you feel small. And if they try, you have every right to remove them from your life, no matter what society says about forgiveness and family loyalty. So, here is my question for you, the person listening to this story. Is there someone in your life who makes you feel worthless? Someone who takes and never gives back? Someone who you keep hoping will change, but deep down you know never will? What are you waiting for? What is your Christmas Eve moment going to be? And more importantly, do you have to wait for it? Or can you start building your escape plan today? Think about it. Really think about it. And if my story resonated with you, if you see yourself in my journey from victim to survivor to victor, please do me a favor. Like this video so others can find it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about breaking free from toxic relationships. And most importantly, leave a comment about your own experience. Your story matters. Your pain is valid. Your decision to choose yourself is not selfish, it is survival. Together, we can break the silence around family abuse and create a community where nobody has to freeze in a snowstorm alone, wondering if they deserve better. Because you do. You absolutely do.